Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 364, recorded Monday, August 25th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all of your favorite podcasting platforms, as well as a video version on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Johnny. You may know him better as Pixel Riffs on the interwebs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and if you're a Transformers fan, this week's render distance is for you, because it's basically all we've been talking about. Joel has been working his way through various Transformers Lego sets, and is also, of course, on a Transformers-inspired run of Satisfactory, if you want to go and check out his stream VODs. But we're going to transform this into a Minecraft podcast now. In the meantime, if you'd like to support this show and get access to that pre-show chat, you can do so at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where this is actually the last stretch in which you can take advantage of our 7-year anniversary discount that we've had on Patreon. The promotion does end on August 31st. If you're already a free member on Patreon, by the way, check out your email for a one-time discount on your first month, and that's going to apply to anybody who's a fresh sign-up over on Patreon too, so check that out. Once again, patreon.com/thespawnchunks. On this week's episode, despite major features being complete, snapshots continue to shape up for the next gameplay drop, and we're also going to chat about some other ways copper could contribute to the magic of Minecraft. So all of that is coming up later in the show.
So what have you been up to in Minecraft this week, Johnny?
So this week, in Survival Guide, I haven't done a whole lot. I've just been replenishing resources after spending a lot of wood building those housing terraces that I made. So I've been tapping into a couple of other things, including the snapshot. Now that it's basically feature complete, I wanted to do a kind of rundown of all of the features so far, get a bit more familiar with some of them, and explain to my YouTube audience at least what I like about each of them. So I did a little tier list video, been mocking up a couple of other designs using shelves to create archways and things like that. So I've had a bit of fun with that. But outside of that, I've also stepped back into Minecraft Bingo in the snapshots because the current Fetcher developer, Noineinser, has been working on a beta version that works in the snapshots and is incorporating some of these new copper items and a few things from the Chase the Skies update that I hadn't actually touched on in Minecraft Bingo before. So it's a beta version that works in 25W33A. Obviously, with the data pack versions rolling on, I'm not certain it's compatible with versions either side of that, but I jumped back in for a few solo bingo rounds. There was a ghast harness on the board for one of them. Copper lanterns were in there. The leather boots with blue armor trim have now been replaced with copper boots. So that's another fun way of getting hold of those. And also kind of ties in quite neatly with what I think copper armor is going to be, which is a substitute for leather armor when people don't find enough cows to create leather armor right at the beginning of the game. I also, actually, for the first time, interacted with the new lead recipe, where it doesn't involve the slime ball anymore, you just create them out of string. So that was an interesting adaptation, and meant that the bingo run didn't require me to find a swamp night one to try and find some slime, which was a welcome change. There's a few other bits and pieces that are on Bingo that have changed since I last played it in 121.4. So saddles are craftable now, so they're back on the item list as well. And it's interesting that now the regular chicken egg is a biome-dependent item, because if you're trying to craft some of the stuff that requires a chicken egg as part of the recipe, you can go to any of the biomes and get an egg from a warm chicken or a cold chicken. So if you've got cake or pumpkin pie that you need to craft, you can use any chicken egg for that. But if you're looking for the egg, it's specifically the traditional egg item, like the temperate biome chicken. And I went and found a warm biome chicken and waited around for it to lay an egg, and it didn't count towards the bingo cards. So bingo is becoming a more nuanced game in this latest raft of updates, and yeah, I'm looking forward to dropping back in when I have a little bit more time on stream and checking out some more of that.
Tell me a little bit more about your tier list. What was the criteria for putting things in like C tier versus A tier?
Well, with the copper tools and armor, I kind of thought more holistically about it. Like, I have my reasons for enjoying the fact that they're in the game. I think they're going to be great for new players. We've discussed that on the show before, but as far as long-term prospects for the game, I didn't really see them having a whole lot going on. I put the copper horse armor in there as well, because I interact with horse armor so infrequently, because I don't really use horses at the stage I'm at in the game, and I thought it's going to be a fun aesthetic thing for players, but whether your horse is wearing copper or iron horse armor, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. I think the hardest thing in this tier list was putting the copper golem in B tier, and I've done that primarily because there are still some issues with it, which we'll actually discuss a little bit later in the show as we talk about the news this week and some changes that are coming to the Copper Golem. And it's really just because there are some outstanding bugs with its behavior when it comes to interacting with chests and comparators that I've found, and also a few more issues with whether it interacts with chests under certain circumstances or not. So I think that would honestly be in S tier for me, considering its potential as multi-item sorter and, you know, all of the other stuff that we can do now that we can have mobs interacting with items in storage, but it just didn't feel like it was quite up to scratch yet. Meanwhile, the one thing I have put in S tier is shelves, because now they've adjusted the items size and scaling and centering and everything in the shelves. I think they're back up to being the number one addition to this snapshot for me, which is hilarious considering that so much of it is focused on copper, and I've been so focused on copper in previous incarnations and series, but the fact that the shelf is the only item in S tier, I think, speaks volumes about where the Copper Golem needs to be in order to reach the top of my esteem.
I don't even know if I've built a shelf in my survival snapshot playthrough. Like, I feel like I've been focusing, again, like you, on the copper items, getting them out there, getting them aged and seeing what they look like in different patinas, and then also messing around with the Copper Golem. And so much of the conversation on the show has been focused around copper and the Copper Golem and how it's working and not working. And I kind of forget briefly that the shelves are coming. You're right. You know, like, it's just one of those things that's not top of my list of, I guess, conversation topics, because now that they've made those adjustments, I feel like everybody's pretty happy with it. So, like, it's the conversation is now, how do we get the Copper Golem to where everyone is happy with it? So, and that answers a question that I had, because I was looking at the list and I was like, "Whoa, the Copper Golem is in the B tier. Like, that's odd." But, like, I guess this is a list that you might revisit after the drop actually comes out, where some of these might be adjusted depending on their, you know, changes that they might make.
Yeah, the Copper Golem statue, on the other hand, I put in A tier, because I think it does exactly what it's supposed to at this point, and I think using the redstone signal output to create like combination locks and interesting features of an environment, like a little puzzle for somebody exploring a big open hall where like there's a couple of copper golems along walls, you can hide comparators behind those walls, and those lead to like signal outputs that are going to open hidden entrances and stuff like that. There's so many little touches that those are going to provide, and I think being able to like right-click them through different poses is really nice functionality for them, and it does still bring up the fact that we can't do that with armor stands in Java Edition, and kind of wishing that we did. But yeah, overall, I'm having a good time with the snapshots. We'll talk a little bit more about that after the news, of course. But yeah, I think shelves are going to be fun when you want vertical slabs and you're going to start like shaping archways with them, and I think the placing items in their functionality, even for decorative interiors, is going to work out okay. But I imagine they'll probably fit really nicely in some interiors in your next projects. Talk to me about West Hill, though, because we're reaching the end of August. How close are you to finishing things up?
I mean, the major builds are done. I finished the distillery and dungeon basement this week, and it feels odd to not have a large task ahead of me. I've decided to do a little bit more landscaping along the east ridge of the valley. Not that it needs a whole lot, but it does feel really strange compared to all the work I did over the last couple of weeks on the west side of the river, and how nice that looks. And the other side has, like, for people that haven't been following, this area was generated before the Nether update, so it's got some pre-Caves and Cliffs kind of jankiness happening on the east side. I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy. Much like the road to the west that kind of disappears over the cliffs, I just kind of want to go in there and smooth out some stuff that looks kind of dumb, grab any floating blocks that I might have missed and just kind of delete those, and then hit it with a bunch of bone meal and tall grass and just kind of cover up the odd shapes in some places. So it shouldn't take too long. I'd imagine I can finish that this week. No issues at all. I do want to take some time off stream and walk around and like make maybe a small list of things I might have missed. One of the things that I did do this week was there was a small courtyard behind the cobbler next to the secret door to the basement it was just empty. It was a mob farm, and it was just not really decorated to have any function. I just put some barrels and crates and a pile of firewood and stuff out there to make it feel like I didn't forget it. So I want to make sure that I comb the build and not miss any things like that, because that would be something that would like make my eye twitch. Announce that it's finished only to find like, oh hey, this backyard that you thought you finished, you didn't touch it at all. It's just grass or something.
The one spelling mistake in the final draft of whatever. It's always the way that you immediately spot the one thing that you didn't take care of. Yeah.
Yeah. So this week in the basement, to focus on the distillery, a lot of it was just like making a design for the copper stills, adding some different textures in there. So using the weathered copper and different waxed versions of that to make them look good. Figuring out the lighting, which was like a combination of like a trapdoor and a frog light and a slab or something or at the bottom to make sure that the light was focused where it was supposed to be, and making sure that the whole thing was lit up so we didn't have any unwanted guests. I lit up the kettle, which is like the boiler, I guess, down there, and have like water in one side and honey in the other. And I piled some not fireworks, firewood out in front of it. And so started adding the details around the outside of the distillery, like crates and barrels of things. I used an invisible item frame and a honeycomb to make it look like one of the barrels was leaking and dripping a little bit of honey on the floor. And I tried it with honey blocks and it did look good, but it kind of looked like overkill. Like it looked like a really big spill. And so I decided on the item frame. The drain and the dungeon, I was having some real issues with. And it was basically a light issue. Like I didn't want to light it brightly, but I was just having issues with having to put soul fire lanterns like everywhere. I was like, this is just overkill. And so through just a chance, I thought, you know what? I bet you this would look pretty good if I managed to put in a window. And I decided to use stair blocks on their sides to put in little porthole windows in the basement of the keep on the south side. And because they're so high up, they don't feel like they're like a security risk in the dungeon. They don't feel like they're something that would be an issue. And you can barely see them from the outside. And they light things up wonderfully, especially with the shaders. They give like a little blue hue to like the drain and to the dungeon. And I had to fake it a little bit. Like there's some texture on the floor of the dungeon that's like hay and sand and things that might be there just to kind of like for some poor soul to sleep on. But I also used a carpet to have like some dirty old blanket in the corner. And I hid a sea pickle underneath it because it wasn't needed for spawn proofing, but it just wasn't getting enough light in that corner. And so one single sea pickle is enough that you can see what's going on there, but not enough that it looks like a light source. And so I did that in a couple places actually in the dungeon where it was a little bit too dark. The closet where I have like an extra copper kettle and some other stuff that I just kind of threw around with sub-block details. I have a sea pickle hidden in there too, because like when you walked in the door, it was just really dark in the left-hand corner in front of you, and it didn't seem to balance out very well. So again, I just put like what looks like a dirty blanket on the floor in the form of a carpet and hit a sea pickle underneath it, and it seemed to do the trick just fine. I might have even used two in that particular case. So I feel like some of those features have really taken the dungeon to just like this pattern of copper stills, so like feeling like a functional space. And one of my favorite things is not putting doors on the secret passages. I've just left them really, really dark, but inside the passage so that you can see where you're going, there's candles into nooks in the wall. And if you go into like the back corner, you can see the candle inside the hallway. You're like, oh, there's a passageway there. But if you're looking at it from the other angle, you can't see it at all. Like it's pretty dark.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well because the walls are made out of deep slate and basalt, so they're pretty dark anyway. All the lighting is soul lanterns. So it was kind of a fun Easter egg to kind of work all that in and have it all like set up in that way. And last but not least, I was able to have a little bit of fun. There's a small hallway in between my dungeon and the drain, and I decided to add some permanent residents hanging from chains in the hall.
Oh no!
So one of the things that I have the mini block stata pack, and then we've got player heads, and I'm not sure how. I guess it was from at some point when you were on the server ages ago for something. And so I had in a chest, I was like, that's Pixelriff's head. I'm going to put that on a chain. And so with some armor stands, I've got you and my co-host on the Citadel Cafe, Steven, are in the dungeon. So it's a podcast themed dungeon where you have permanent residents, and in between you is a quartz ore block from the nether, which looks like a chunk of something with a rib cage in it. So it gets pretty it's pretty morbid, but it was just like the hallway was kind of empty and not really serving a purpose. And I was like, you know what, I can probably do something here that could be a little bit fun and like a nice little Easter egg. And the chat in live stream had a good chuckle over that as well. But it's been fun. It's really cool to see this come together. It's a weird feeling to have no major project, and even stranger to have my staging area, which is what this space used to be, now gone. I am now 100% living under the graveyard in a series of crypts filled with shulker boxes of random items that I have to sort through off stream. And that is an odd feeling. Like it's like moving into a different apartment after 4 years, you know, like it's just a strange feeling. So part of what I'm going to be doing in the next little while is organizing, preparing to move out of the area, but then also, like I said, the landscaping and whatnot. And like I said, it should be done. I set myself a deadline for this month, and it should be finished this month. And then I'm hoping to do some cool tour videos and stuff and have them up in September.
Yeah, exciting times. I think it's great. And yeah, very funny that you're living under the graveyard and you've got your podcast co-hosts in the dungeon. And like, it's a very sepulchral existence, despite how wholesome some of the screenshots of this look, especially when you've got like the cityscape out in front of you and the sunrise in the background and everything. Like, I think it's looking great. I think the distillery looks fantastic now that you've got all of the aged copper and stuff in there and all of these little kind of details in the nooks and crannies of this area. It's such a good use of the space. I think, honestly, I'm jealous a little bit of the fact that you've got stuff like note blocks reskinned as crates and that kind of stuff, and all the little mini blocks, the details that I don't allow myself when I'm playing like the pure vanilla version of the game, but just add to all of those storage areas that need to feel like there are miscellaneous things here and there, and there's only so much you can do with just like beehives and barrels in addition to the existing chest texture. So I think it's very neat use of little storage areas like that to take them all the way with the extra mile of detail.
Thanks, man. One of the tips that I can share with folks that are playing on vanilla is a stripped spruce block with signs around the outside and a spruce trapdoor on the top. You know, looks like a decent kind of crate or barrel, and you can double that. Like, you can make it into a 2x2 and put like straps of signs around it and a whole top of trapdoors, and it actually works pretty well as like a giant crate if you want to do that. I use that all the time, not necessarily as like the forefront of what I'm doing, but usually it's like if I need to get something higher, like if I want to put a beehive higher, I'll put it on top of one of these kind of like custom looking crates, just so that I'm not putting it on top of yet another barrel, because I did use a lot of barrels in this, because I mean, it's a distillery, so there's gonna be barrels everywhere.
Yeah, of course.
But I wanted to make sure that I had some variety there, and it is nice. I think the thing for me in these little areas, it's the mini block data pack from Vanilla Tweaks, where you just put the block into the stone cutter and it gives you 8 of that in a small mini form. And so beehives are great, chests are great, barrels are great. I think I've used other things like looms, and there's a couple of other things that are really, really handy. Logs that for firewood, like having like smaller pieces of logs or smaller branches around. It really does help kind of add that level of detail and life to a build. That's essentially like a diorama, you know, like it's like a still life. I don't have villagers, and there's only me. There's no players walking around doing anything. So the place has to feel lived in because of the stuff strewn around. And so it really helps when you have like little things that look like a player could move it, you know?
Yeah, things that can kind of model stuff almost. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's all looking phenomenal, and yeah, looking forward to you signing off on that project and moving on to whatever comes next.
It will be an era shift, that's for sure. For news this week, Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 25W34A and B were released last week. This time, it's a smaller snapshot with a new main menu panorama, code of conducts for servers, and much tinkering and fixing with our new friends, the Copper Golems. Happy mining. That's from the post on Minecraft.net. The quick hotfix was released for 25W34B. The changelog will focus on 25W34A this week. Servers can now have an in-game code of conduct. When connecting to a server, a code of conduct screen can now be shown. Accepting the code of conduct is required to play on the server. A checkbox is available for not showing the same code of conduct in the future. If the code of conduct changes, it will be shown again. A new Boolean field has been added for server.properties called enable code of conduct. Setting it to true will make the server look for code of conduct files in the code of conduct subfolder in the same folder as server.properties. The language shown will attempt to match the player's language. If the language doesn't exist, the English code of conduct will be used. If that also doesn't exist, an arbitrary available entry is used. Changes in 25W34A. The main menu now has an updated background panorama showing copper golems in a village. The sound effect produced by the end light flashes now has a higher delay, and the hide lighting flashes accessibility setting has been renamed to hide sky flashes and now disables the end flashes. When the flash is disabled by the setting, the world will not be lit by the flash, but the flash source will still be visible in the sky and the sound effect will still play. The eyes of the copper golem are now invisible as well when splashed with a potion of invisibility. The copper golem hitbox has been also tweaked. The hitbox is now 0.6 blocks in width to be able to pathfind through open doors, and the hitbox is now 1.01 blocks in height to not get stuck on certain blocks. Copper golems and copper chests are now audible from up to 12 blocks away. The copper sorting sounds have been tweaked to be quieter. Technical changes in 25W34A. The data pack version is now 84 and the resource pack version is now 66. In the data pack, player profiles in data components and block entities no longer resolve automatically. Added the fetch profile command for downloading player profiles. Removed align items to bottom block state property from the shelf block. It has been replaced with an equally named Boolean field on the shelf block entity. Shelves created with this property set in the last snapshot will reset back to the default value of false. Fetch profile is a new command that has been added to fetch contents of player profiles from Minecraft servers. Since the operation might take some time, it works asynchronously. Results will be printed only when the operation finishes, but the game will keep running unpaused. More information about the syntax, data components, and properties of fetch profile commands are outlined and detailed in the Snapshot changelog, linked in our show notes this week. Fixed bugs of note in 25W34A. In the world selection screen, world names, versions, and timestamps can overflow the list on the right. Item frames, glow items frames don't change their hitbox if they contain a map. Water and lava can drip from barriers. Fletching tables flashes crafting GUI for about a second upon right-clicking in spectator mode. Elements within the command block interface are not selected in order when used the tab key. Hovering over banner patterns in the Loom UI does not display tooltips. Enchanted books have the wrong rarity. Normal guardians are no longer able to enter boats. There are a lot of other bug fixes, but here are some focusing on the copper golem. The hand animation plays when right-clicking copper golems. The copper golem statue models in the inventory are partly cut off at the top. Copper golem statues, items, entities are rendered too large. Copper golems with no AI tag can adjust rotation and spin. Copper golems with the silent tag can still produce some sounds. Copper golem statues poses are off-centered. Copper golem's hitbox is too large to fit through single doors. Copper golems inconsistently activate trapped chests. Worn copper golem statues are incorrectly rotated, and copper golem wears banners backwards. For the full list of bug fixes and deeper technical dives into this week's snapshot, visit the changelog at minecraft.net, and that's linked at our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So the code of conduct thing is the sort of major new feature, and it makes perfect sense to me. I think it's pretty standard whenever you enter any kind of online space. Like, I've seen them in Discord chats. I have one myself in my Twitch chat. You typically accept a set of rules before you start chatting, or, you know, before you're allowed to play in a space like this. There's a lot of, like, EULA notices when you first log into a game that has online play to begin with, which I know Minecraft has on the main menu, but I think it makes sense, especially for servers, to be able to set their own rules of conduct, to have that available to them. It's good that it's configurable through the server properties, and I think also will help server owners remind players of behavior that might cross a line with Minecraft's global moderation rules, which I know is much more of a discussion topic in years previous, but it's still very much a thing, and is still something that players will want to stay on the good side of, basically.
Yeah, I'm looking to exploring this myself because I have a patron server, and it just refreshed in August, so we've got some new members. And previously on another version of the server, we've just used a Google Doc that we've called a charter, and that was written by myself and the mods, and just kind of like a general code of conduct. It wasn't so much hard and fast rules. It was more like almost like an FAQ, like kind of like, can I stream from the server? What's the best way to go about this? Like, how do we share resources? Like that kind of stuff. And so because it's not a public space, it's for people to support me on Patreon. I don't have as much of an issue with code of conduct as I think public servers would. And so I can see this being a boon for both. Like it's going to be something that reduces the friction of like, oh, we've got a great, get a new member. That's awesome. Make sure that they get a link to the charter. Now we can just like, even if it's not written in the code of conduct text file, we can at least link to the charter in that text file and like be like, hey, just go here, like follow this link and read the charter before you join. And I think that's great. And I love the fact that if you update the charter, it then will, or not the charter, the code of conduct, sorry, in the Minecraft files, that it will then pop up again. And hopefully there'll be a message also saying like, it's been updated. Like you've read it before, but we're showing it to you again because it's been changed. I'm sure you and many others have received emails like this from a lot of the services that I'm a member of, whether it's PayPal or whatever. In the last few weeks, there's been a lot of emails saying we've updated our terms of service, we've updated our, EULA, all that kind of stuff. And it's not always something I dive in and read, but it's nice with something that you probably spend enough time on, like a Minecraft server, to know when that happens. So I think it's a cool feature.
I mean, I get them from my car. Like my car has like a digital like onboard computer thing that it says like you need to accept the terms and conditions, and it's not like it's not going to let me drive it, but it's also like, hey, there's maybe some rules here that have been updated that you need to like remind yourself of, like legalese and stuff. And yeah, it happens. We're all sort of used to it. It's a fact of modern life at this point. But I think it's good that especially for the sake of public conduct on public servers, that stuff like that exists, and nobody's going to have the excuse of saying, oh, I didn't read it, like it wasn't signposted to me that these were the rules. Like it's going to be there. It's a common sense thing, I think, really. I'm still hoping that any snapshots we get this week are going to have a few additional tweaks to behavior for the Copper Golem. To go back to what I was saying earlier, the things that kept it in B tier for me when I was doing my tier list this week, I do think there are a couple of, like, I wouldn't necessarily call them bugs so much. There's one bug that I think I found, and the rest is more just kind of behavior preferences that I would have for the Golem. I think you talked about having had trouble with it pathfinding to and using chests that shouldn't be blocked as far as players being able to open them, but like if they've got a slab or a stair over the top of them and the Golem is unable to identify them as a chest that it can open. I think, honestly, even though it makes sense for them to be able to walk up to stuff that's at sort of floor level for them so that they can look into the chest's contents, considering that players can interact with a chest that they can see and reach within, like, from whatever angle, from underneath, anything like that, I do think Copper Golems should be able to do that kind of stuff as well. And so I'm hoping that there will be a tweak to their behavior that allows them to open chests that are just within their reach, regardless of what direction they're accessing the chest from. Especially considering, barrels and that kind of thing, you can access them from any face, and they can be rotated in any direction, but they still function perfectly well as a storage chest, even if the hole that opens at the bottom of the barrel is like upside down. I think there's a few things like that are keeping Copper Golems from being used smoothly by players who are unfamiliar with all of these little behavioral quirks that are currently in the snapshot. And so I'm hoping that those get ironed out. I have found an issue where they don't always update comparators when they add items to a double chest. And it depends which half of the chest the Golem's placing an item and which half the comparator is looking at. But that's prevented one configuration of a multi-item sorter that I had planned out, and I had to make sure that the comparator was on the left-hand side of the chest if they were adding items to the top of the chest's inventory. And so I'm hoping that that's another issue that is probably on the bug tracker by now, but if not, I'll try and create an issue for that to make sure it gets fixed, because I think with players, once again, being able to update a chest by placing an item anywhere and the comparator will notice when items have been added, the Copper Golem should absolutely be doing that as well, considering that's one of its major uses. On the flip side, looking at the changelog for this week, it's great that the change to the hitbox happened, because I did notice them getting stuck on doors a couple of times when I was playing with them, like in a village context in a snapshot world, compared to on Bedrock Edition where they hadn't had that problem at all previously. So I think it's good that they're making a couple of changes to the Copper Golem so far, and I think a few more of those changes are going to really make it more approachable to new players especially.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like they're all going in the right direction. It sounds like they really didn't want the Golem getting into a 1 block high space. Like 1.01 blocks high it's like, I understand that it's taller than a block. Like it's got this little, lightning rod antenna thing, but it's such an odd thing to say. Like it's going to be almost short enough to go in under a 1 block space, and
Yeah.
you're gonna have to let it go through like, I guess, like a block and a half to see it move around. But that's cool because like you could, even if you didn't want to use a door that they can now pass through, you could have just like a little, like a little doggy door, like a block and a slab worth of space for the golem to go through if it had to travel down the corridor looking for chests. So you could have some fun little side design projects to like give your golems a special hallway that's like built for them, in the same way that you have like cat houses in people's apartments and stuff like that for cats to climb and tunnel through and stuff. Like it could be really interesting what you can come up with given the space. And as you said, if copper golems, and I agree, are allowed to grab a chest that's directly above them or directly to the side or down, as opposed to just looking for one that's on their level, I think that would be beneficial to, again, more inventive and fun and cool looking sorting designs that might be more useful for players, especially more technical players that want to kind of take advantage of the copper golem. And I do wonder, because of the height and because a chest is not as big as a block, I'm wondering if a copper golem could walk underneath a chest if the chest is 1 block above the ground, or if you have to dig like a trough for them, like if they have to have like a sub slab or just be 1 block lower, because that would be interesting to have a golem be able to walk underneath a double chest that might have a hopper on the other side of it, but then access the part that doesn't have a hopper. Like, just be kind of fun as a design way to kind of like tuck your copper golems into a certain area.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's good that they can still get around some of those smaller spaces, but yeah, they aren't gonna just duck into any 1 block hole and then like lobster pot themselves in there and find that they can't get back out, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been into the end in Vibrant Visuals in Bedrock or in this snapshot in Java to see the light flashes that are in the end?
No, I haven't seen the light flashes personally. I've watched a couple of videos where I've seen it happen, and it's nice that they have the accessibility in there, because I did think, like, I didn't mind it, but my first thought was like, that is not going to be the favorite thing for some people, and it's interesting that they've decided to have that accessibility change. I find it odd that they removed the lighting part of it, but not the flash in the sky.
Yeah.
Because then you've got this weird kind of like, and I would say, like, if I know it's probably unfinished, I know it's probably leading into Vibrant Visuals, but like right now, it looks like a giant airbrush click from Photoshop in the sky.
Yeah.
Like, it's really underwhelming and feels very odd in the end to me. So I don't want to pass judgment on it because it feels so yet unfinished. But the controls are nice. Like, it's nice that people are able to turn that off, and it's not going to change the lighting on the blocks around you.
Yeah. I certainly hope that it's fulfilling the needs of anybody who's got like photosensitivity issues or anything like that. But yeah, I think it's interesting that they've implemented it in vanilla before going ahead with Vibrant Visuals, because as far as I recall, there wasn't a version of that translated out of Vibrant Visuals in Bedrock Edition. So they've made it like a permanent feature of the end in general that it does that now, which I think does make sense for Vibrant Visuals not to have anything like that doesn't take place in default graphics. But yeah, it's interesting that they've chosen to implement that. And looking at the way it lights up the environment of the end, it does actually produce what looks like block light, is really skylight, but it definitely changes the lighting vibe of the end in a quite significant way. The main difference between what it does on Vibrant Visuals and what it does just in default graphics now is that with Vibrant Visuals on Bedrock, it casts a lot of shadows of the chorus plants, which I think looks really cool and atmospheric when you're out there in the end. And the only reason they don't have that in Java so far is because the shadows aren't implemented that way. So I'm curious once again to see if that leads to Vibrant Visuals coming to Java sooner rather than later, and if this is just one of those things that they needed to iron out in the meantime. But it's interesting that that's now a major feature of the end, and I wonder if that means there's other stuff coming to the end in future that might support, why these flashes are happening. Are there additional atmospheric effects they want to add to that dimension? And, does it mean potentially that we'll be finding something else out there that could be the source of this light, or is it just meant to be a sort of vaguely stormy dimension in general?
I'm wondering if the reason they decided to choose a source, if because it was too overwhelming to just change the whole skybox, like whether that was too much. Because I'm trying to remember how it looks in the overworld when lightning happens, and I think it's just the sky lights up, but nothing happens to the ground, as far as I could remember.
No, I don't think so.
Don't think I've I don't think I was in a thunder and lightning storm in Vibrant Visuals and Bedrock. I don't remember that happening, so I don't recall whether that also had like lighting effects, like a flash of lightning. If it like had like shadows that would be snap cast across the ground from a tree or whatever. I don't remember that. But like it feels more of a sky effect in the overworld than it does like like in front of you effect. In the same way that rain very much happens in front of you, but then the sky also changes gray. So I don't know. I wonder if maybe changing the light in the end to be going from like that black spacey look to something that's very bright, like magenta or purple, was too harsh, and it felt too much like a strobe effect, or they felt that it would affect people with photosensitivity, that kind of thing. Because I don't recall. It's been a really long time since I've loaded up a fresh version of Minecraft. Like, did they give you like a photosensitivity warning, like a lot of other video games do?
I don't recall, but then like you, it's been a while since I loaded up a fresh instance that wasn't a snapshot, and I think a lot of the snapshots don't re-up any of those kind of warning messages at the beginning of things. I think if anything, the most I've gotten is just a like multiplayer play, like an online play warning, rather than a photosensitivity heads up. But I guess that's why the accessibility settings menu exists, and yeah, hopefully people can continue to give feedback if it's the kind of stuff that's going to affect them.
Right. Moving on into Chunkmail. If you'd like to email the show, the Chunkmail address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please use that address. It's one of the best ways to get in touch with the show. We do read our comments on social media, but it's hard to catalog questions and ideas there. Better to send it in via email. Please keep the emails short if you can, and let us know if you're a patron, because we may read those emails first. But we do also just pick the best emails for the show, and Johnny has got the first one.
Yes, this one comes in from Daniel M. with the subject of updates to existing features. Hello, Johnny and Joel. With the new game drop system, I feel like the Minecraft team has more freedom for small updates to existing features, as they don't need to be tied to a major update theme. One thing that I would like to see addressed are the villager workstations that lack unique or any functionality. An idea I had was to allow the blast furnace to smelt raw ore blocks into the associated material block. The blast furnace would be able to smelt the block at a discounted fuel price. Potentially one coal could smelt 2 ore blocks. The current functionality of slightly faster smelting of ores is fine, but is quickly made obsolete by even a rudimentary super smelter. However, infinite fuel smelters are much more complex than a simple hopper-feeding furnace system, so a save in fuel would have more of an impact on this system than a small item save. As there are many players experienced enough to need mass material production but don't want to get into the super technical aspects of the game, I feel like this change would increase the number of players using the blast furnace. I would love to hear your thoughts on this idea, or any other ideas you have for the blast furnace or other workstations.
So my endgame-itis was showing when I first responded to this, because I was like raw ore blocks. Like, wouldn't that be a disservice? Like, wouldn't it be faster to just get your fortune pickaxe and just do it that way? But I was thinking about the actual silk touched ore block out of the wall, not the ore block of like the new way that ores are dropped when you mine a block. So in that light, one piece of coal to smelt 2 ore blocks, which would yield 18 ingots, feels unbalanced to me. That just feels like super fast. At best, I could see Mojang making it slightly more efficient than regular smelting. So instead of a 1-to-1 in a furnace, I could see it being like a 1-to-1.2, like or something like that, where you might get 1 or 2 extra ingots out of using a blast furnace, not 18 times the yield. So I don't know how that would necessarily work. Adding ore blocks does add some potential gameplay though, because then you could have an incorporated crafter. So like you could dump your ore into a crafter, it crafts it into a block, spits it into a furnace, or blast furnace rather, and then that then goes through your line. So it's a little bit more complicated than a basic setup, but if it did yield some benefits, then that could be kind of a fun way to introduce really basic crafting and auto crafting to a player. I would also argue that most players use an iron farm to replace any immediate need for faster smelting, and that's the main purpose of faster smelting. I don't ever remember you needing so much gold or so much copper that I had to have like a super smelter for it. But as copper becomes more popular, that could be more of a thing in early game where they want those to be more efficient. But I didn't really see the balance here. I did have some ideas though for furnaces in general, like normal, blast, and the smoker. I rarely use a blast furnace or a smoker outside of decoration. And I think it's just old habits combined with the windfall of the benefits just aren't enough for me to like always carry one with me. It's way easier just to have 4 furnaces in an ender chest or a shulker box with me. And if I need to smelt things faster, I just spread them out. Like I'll just put, coal in 4 different furnaces and spread a stack in, 4 different shots of 16 and get it done faster that way, rather than wanting something that does it more efficiently. And again, that's me at endgame with so much fuel, I don't know what to do with it. So I'm not hurting for it. I could say in my snapshot playthrough that I might be a little bit lower on coal, so I could see this being more of a benefit. But I just don't see any great need for individual furnaces to be faster. So the only thing I could think of would be like an update to the UI where maybe you could put in 2 ores at once or more. Or if we ever got to the point where we were combining ores, I could see a blast furnace saying like, yeah, I smelt things a little bit more efficiently from a metal standpoint, and the smoker does it for food. But if the blast furnace said, oh, well, now this new idea, you can put copper and iron together in the blast furnace and get something new out. That's where I could see a value add to the blast furnace. Like, how are you with your furnace stuff? Like, when you do a furnace array on the survival guide, like, do you use regular furnaces or do you use blast furnaces?
I think I use regular furnaces just for the versatility. The fact that you can throw anything in there and it doesn't matter. As long as it can be cooked or smelted, it will be. Like, glass is the main thing, right? If you're throwing a bunch of sand in there, it won't work in a blast furnace. You can't smoke glass. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense to use furnaces for more general applications. And obviously, yeah, a furnace array is going to smelt a stack faster than a single blast furnace. But then if you set up a blast furnace array and you know that you're putting metal in there, then that can smelt a stack of metal twice as fast. And the same sort of thing applies. I think when I'm carrying stuff around and I know I'll need to cook something on the fly, but I don't know what it is, I have a furnace in my bundle that I bring with me that's got the other crafting stations, a stone cutter, a crafting table, the ender chest. And I feel like usually I'll set up furnaces everywhere else that I go just because it's so easy to acquire the materials for them, whereas blast furnaces, the recipe is more complex, and like even smokers having all of the logs and stuff extra. I don't think I've ever needed a furnace array to cook food either. Like if I'm cooking food, it's usually a stack at a time, unless it's kelp, and usually that's because I want to reform it into blocks, build with it, or use that as fuel, and I set that up next to a kelp farm anyway, so it's going to be stationary. When you're on the move, you just use furnaces in general because bringing anything else with you feels like overkill, and most of the time you're not going to need to use the metals that you're smelting, except in small numbers, like if you need 3 iron to recraft an iron pickaxe in the early days, you're not going to spend 5 iron on a blast furnace just so you can get that 3 iron back slightly faster, right? I think the main issue with it is that the blast furnaces and smokers, the only thing you really gain with them is time. Like it happens faster. And there are lots of other ways to get around that issue. There are lots of other solutions to something taking a long time to smelt, which, you outlined. Just bring 4 furnaces with you and split that apart, and then it takes, a quarter of the time to smelt a stack of material. Whereas, yeah, if you have 2 blast furnaces, it does the same thing. You're compacting it in space, but, the time thing is sort of like what makes it immaterial. I think the problem with smelting raw ore blocks and then messing with the amount of fuel it takes to smelt something, or the amount of time it takes that to smelt, is that let's say you smelt one of those blocks, it gets started on the other one, but then you remove the ore block halfway through smelting it and put something else in. Does it then have to recalibrate how much time is left on that fuel output and how many items it's going to smelt before the furnace runs out of time? There are like little things like that, fringe cases, that if you interrupt something in the middle of a process, does it resume its previous behavior? How do you tell the game how to do that? And having different smelting times for different objects just complicates that in the player's mind, I think. And I don't think it's quite right to have an ore block take the same amount of time as a single piece of ore to smelt, which is probably why they haven't done the straight 1-to-1 conversion between a full block of raw iron and an output being a full iron block of 9 iron ingots. The other aspect of that is that you're factoring this around the amount of time it takes a piece of coal to smelt something. Well, what about all of the other fuel types? Are sticks going to be just as effective in a blast furnace? What about blaze rods? What about kelp blocks? What about blocks of coal? You know, it ends up with a lot of additional calculations having to be made off the top of the coal being like the unitary resource. And I think it's kind of difficult for them to reshape that in a way that feels understandable to players and feels understandable that only this group of items is smelted that way and everything else has a different set of rules to it. I think that just overcomplicates things in a way that we don't really need. That said, I understand why you think it makes sense for these things to have more of a unique purpose to them, and I would agree with blast furnaces in future being used to alloy things instead of just smelt metals faster. Makes sense if they want to reformat blast furnaces in future. In the meantime, though, I think the main thing to remember is that they are villager workstations, and when people talk about the fletching table not having a use, I understand that in terms of the player not having a GUI and some way that you can interact with it, but its use is still to create Fletcher villagers. And so even if you don't have any player-facing functionality for that, the player still benefits from them being in the game by having them available as villager workstations. So really it's kind of a here or there proposition for me. Like I would be fine with them doing something interesting with them if Mojang has a firm idea of what that could be, but I find a lot of the halfway solutions to making them more interesting as a proposition tend to fall short for me, I guess.
Yeah. I went for some parity with one of my ideas for the Cauldron, dyeing armor as a feature parity with Bedrock.
Yes.
Even just dyeing the water in Java would be great for the 16 main dye colors, just as like a flavor thing. Like you just want to have like a witch's brew, something pink or red, hanging outside of your witch hut. Stuff like that I think would be fairly simple, I think, to do. I think you'd have to be careful that when you take a bucket of red water out of a cauldron, that it doesn't end up being a red bucket. And then like what happens when you dump that in the ocean? Like I think there, like you said, fringe cases where you'd have to address that, what that would actually do. But on the surface, I think that it's probably a fun idea. Even cauldrons that could hold potions could be kind of fun. Mini games, things like that. Refill your bottle, grab the speed potion, keep on going, that kind of thing. Potion of swiftness, that kind of stuff. I also really like the idea of changing the stonecutter. I know that the stonecutter has stone in its name, but I really think that it would be great to have the stonecutter apply the same output to wood blocks. Putting stone in there and getting stairs or slabs or walls 1-to-1 or however the ratio is, it's much nicer to do that with the data pack that we normally have on the Citadel, but I have not had since we updated to 1.21.5, and I miss it. Whenever I go to make stairs or slabs or something, it's nice. Now, on our data pack, we've controlled the output. We get a little bit more trapdoors than you normally would, that kind of thing. But ultimately, even if the ratios are exactly the same, it's just more convenient, and I feel like it's a little bit more fun to just get like a couple of things. When you need one stair, it's just nice to throw in a plank and get a stair and that be done with it. In that light, I also think a simple tweak to the stonecutter that would be a good quality of life change would be the ability to get the same kind of blocks out of deep slate that you do cobbled deep slate. That's also a data pack that we throw on the Citadel server. And there's no ratio changes. It's just the ability to make all of the different deep slate variants out of deep slate, not just cobbled deep slate. Because if you're someone like me that went to go buy a bunch of deep slate, forgot they had a silk touch pick with you, now whenever you need cobbled deep slate to do your stone cutting, you have to lay down a stack and then mine it with a different pick and then do it again that way. It's not a terrible time sink, but it is kind of boring. So that, I think that change to the stone cutter would be where I would want to see some easy adjustments.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely agree that Cauldrons having parity with Bedrock and Java, like erring on the side of Bedrock, adds more creative options. Like, I don't know for certain if I'd want tipped arrows to be created that way, because right now I think that gives a use for Dragon's Breath in Java Edition, which we don't have otherwise, aside from lingering potions, which people rarely tend to use. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity to have at least dye interacted with Cauldrons in that way and make it a bit more interesting and more creative. The only other thing I could think of in terms of workstation uses, aside from shrugging at the fletching table as we usually do, is a use for lecterns, which already I feel like are one of the more usable workstations, both decoratively and in terms of functionality. They have redstone output, the comparator signal, just displaying written books is good. But I wondered, considering the shelf is now in the game and we have other options for item display, I wonder if lecterns could also display things other than books and be something more like an angled item frame for the traditional sprite that you'd see in other circumstances, like if it was put in an item frame. I like the idea if you could have, even if it had like a standard display for anything that wasn't a book, if you put like a raw chicken in there or something, it would still just look like a stretched out sprite of a raw chicken. But if there were other items that you could have a unique display for, I think that'd be a really interesting opportunity to get more models into the game and allow for something that felt a little bit more interesting, a bit more 3D. Even having, you put a stone slab in there and suddenly it looks a bit more like something that's being like a builder's hod that they'd use to carry bricks or something like that, right? You could have something a little bit more interesting as a use for a lectern. So that was one of my thoughts, but I think really I'm quite happy with the way workstations are, and a lot of the stuff that I would project onto workstations as new and interesting functionality could just as easily be added in a new block that we could get excited over, rather than it being added into the mechanics that we already have in the game for those stations.
Yeah. Looping back to Daniel's thought about fairly simple updates because of the new drop frequency and Mojang revisiting older stuff, an idea that we had on the show a while ago that I will call back to is I really like the idea of workstations in general being placed like barrels. It would just open up so many more decorative purposes for not the function of the workstation, but just like putting it somewhere and using it for something else. Like the top or bottom of a blast furnace being used as a floor is great right now, but you can't use it as a wall. It would be really cool if you could. So that kind of stuff would be nice. And even if like they have to draw a line and say, okay, fine, like you can't use a fletching table or a cartography table like a barrel, you can't put it upside down. But even if you could just have it face any of the four cardinal directions in the same way that when you place a furnace down, it faces you when you place it down, I think having that level of control on most of the profession blocks would open up some great textures for building, rather than having to have your build be focused on whatever direction, like the one smooth side of the cartography table. Like if you like that texture, you can only use it on one wall. You can't use it on the others because it just doesn't work. So I think that kind of thing would be very flexible in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see why they allow, like, they don't allow stuff like crafting tables to be put on their sides, because when you interact with the block, you're still ostensibly using the top part of the table to craft something, whereas you can put the crafter oriented in any of the 6 directions because the crafting is happening inside the block rather than on top of the block. So I get the logic there, but I do think it would be really nice to be able to rotate stuff like the cartography table and the fletching table to use some of those side textures on the off chance that builders have the opportunity to use them.
We're going to use the second email as our main discussion this week, and this comes in from Cinco. And it is about Copper the Bridge, ? Hope you both are having a fantastic day, month, and year. A lot of the talk lately has been about copper and potentially leading to a Minecraft, quote, industrial revolution of sorts. It's understandable for players to think that way. However, I don't think that makes sense for Minecraft. What if instead copper could be the bridge between tech, redstone, and magic, lapis? We already have some similar things in the game with a combination of redstone and nature with Skulk. Also, if we think about it, we don't actually construct copper golems. We put a pumpkin on a block of copper and the copper golem suddenly appears, almost like magic. We also don't power these golems with anything. They simply run around on some other force, again, like magic. What if copper could be the catalyst to a more direct form of magic rather than villagers or books for the randomness of the crafting table? I wouldn't want a press easy button for magic, of course. I think limitations are what drives imagination of players. Cinco slept through the night dreaming about combining lapis and copper into a wand. Cinco suddenly woke up, wondering if he got the idea subconsciously from Arcane. Arcane's a great series. I think lots of Minecraft ideas could probably be pulled from Arcane.
Yeah. I'm going to push back on the idea that copper and a pumpkin, this sort of like magical combination, that copper is responsible for that in the making of the copper golem. I think it's the pumpkin, to be quite honest. We've been constructing iron golems and snow golems like this for years. I would argue the carved pumpkin is the magical element of that, and the copper is sort of the inert thing that's getting turned into a creature by the addition of the pumpkin. But with that said, I think it's an interesting direction to expand the notion of magic in Minecraft to include minerals, because I've been thinking about this as how Minecraft can make a magic system feel unique to it. I think it's difficult to introduce a magic system without cribbing from any of the thousands of fantasy universes that already have some system of magic. But you don't want Minecraft to copy the magic system from The Witcher or, insert video game or fantasy property here, right? So I wonder if there are ways that Minecraft can be more about pulling magic from the environment around you and from the minerals that are in the game themselves, of which copper is a recent one. So I like doubling down on the magic of the natural world by allowing for a substance like copper, perhaps, to be used in this way.
Yeah, one of the major issues I have with magic and enchanting is the randomness of it. And I think it's the reason I just don't care about it. Do I enchant my gear? Yes. Do I think about it afterwards? No, not in the least. Like I move on immediately and don't really fuss about it too much. And I find the multiple levels of enchanting to be convoluted and contribute to the randomness problem. So I do like the idea of something honing in on that a little bit and giving players a little bit more of what they can expect. Like, I like the idea of just give me efficiency. I know what it does in the same way that I will know what Silk Touch does. I don't need efficiency 1, 2, and 3. Like, you can just, or 4, like just have it be just a simple thing. Or use something in the game to get you there, to remove some of the randomness of it. And I could see copper being used to hone the process of that, but I'm not sure that that's the best use case. Like, I feel like in our previous episodes, we've talked a lot about copper for rails and things like that. So I agree with you. Like, I think that copper is a little bit more geared towards that kind of stuff than it would be necessarily towards magic. But I like the idea of magic in the game needing some refinement, though. Like, I can see like a through line here that could be useful.
Yeah, I think looking at what we already have as far as magic goes, I think we're mainly going to be focusing on the example from Cinco's email, which was Lapis. Lapis isn't linked to magic by anything historical or mythological, right? Like, they just decided arbitrarily that it should be the catalyst for enchanting to give it a use other than just blue dye or a blue block. And I wonder if... I think I've seen this idea before of using different materials as enchanting catalysts, where maybe Lapis stays as a more general but very random catalyst and is capable of producing the enchants that it does now, where you don't necessarily know what you're getting, while other materials could give greater weight towards different categories of enchants. But of those, I honestly think that other gemstones like amethyst, emerald, or diamond might seem like better candidates because they're already grouped together with stuff like lapis. Even stuff like glowstone or redstone dust maybe lend themselves a bit more to stuff like that than copper does, especially with the commonality of copper at this point. I think maybe it's too common of a material to really think about being part of a magic system. But I think the major problem with this sort of enchanting catalyst idea is that there are not a broad enough range of enchantments that are applicable to everything. Like, swords and boots currently have the greatest number of possible enchantments. You can have 9 enchantments. Obviously, some are mutually exclusive. But then, you look at shields and elytra, you can only put mending and unbreaking on those. You can't even enchant them natively in the table because all you would get would be unbreaking and there wouldn't be any kind of variation in that. Of the equipment enchantable by the table, fishing rods can only get 3 enchantments from the table and then a 4th if you add mending. Even that feels a little bit kind of hit or miss. Like, half the time you fish up an enchanted fishing rod and then just end up using that anyway. But I think, there isn't really enough room in the enchanting system right now to expand it to have all of these different material catalysts. But there's also a problem where if you end up expanding the enchanting system even more, it starts to feel bloated. I think it's already starting to feel bloated with the amount of randomness you get from enchanting books, the amount of things you have to sort of churn through, all of the, projectile protection, piercing, multi-shot, specialized enchants that only work for stuff like tridents and crossbows when all you want is Unbreaking 3 to apply to literally anything in your toolset. So yeah, I think the difficulty with expanding magic is the foundations of magic in Minecraft need a bit of a rework, and we sort of need to define how much we want magic to be a part of the setting of Minecraft in general. Because that's the other major issue, is that if you have too much magic, you end up skewing the setting of Minecraft into something that's more inherently fantasy coded, and that feels odd when you're building something like a modern city to have, somebody zipping by on a broom or using a flying spell or something like that, compared to this sort of very much its own identity of having elytra and boosting around with fireworks, and that feels a lot more kind of original to Minecraft than any other system for flight or, casting spells and throwing potions and that kind of thing. Like, how much of that is similar to other magic universes that you've seen, and how much of it detracts from the notion of you being able to build in whatever style and use Minecraft to evoke whatever mood you want.
Yeah, I was thinking about real world applications for copper and how they could be brought into something like magic. And one thing that I thought of would be using something like cooking for copper, or by proxy alchemy. Like if you were to combine potions or be able to combine, we use the anvil to combine enchant, so that's not the best example, but like something where you could combine a book and a block or something to get something new, like a new texture to play with or something. I was talking a couple of streams ago about how much I really like the effect of waxing a copper block and the little sparkles that you get afterwards, and how cool it would be if there was a way to do that in the world on purpose, either via pulses or just have a block that does that. Very similar to how like the Ender chest has like a particle effect that kind of you can see around it. And using something copper related to like, dip a block in something or melt it down or something along those lines. But again, then you start crossing over into like, well, that's what we use furnaces for. So like, it's kind of hard to like find a unique case for it. But with regards to other things that are magical in the game that are very uniquely Minecraft, beacons come to mind. And copper is the only block in that class that you can't build a beacon with. Like iron, gold, diamonds, emeralds, you can netherite, you can do it all. But copper, I don't know whether they've just decided it's too common. Like, is it too easy to get that much copper to build a beacon? Because it's also easier to remove. I'd rather use a copper block to build a beacon than an iron block, which is what I currently use. And I know there are some tryhards out there that like to do netherite beacons, but like, I don't think that anything right now with the beacons not giving you any additional benefit with what they're made of. Like they don't last longer, they don't have a longer range, like it's all just the same. So I'm wondering, like, when we think about copper and connectivity or conductivity rather in the real world, like, is copper too common in Minecraft to then use on a beacon to then amplify it somehow? Would it make more sense to have diamond do that? So it's funny because when you get into thinking about these materials in games and how they have an existing hierarchy, if you upset that, then it changes how players kind of think about those materials. Wherein right now, I think players still hold diamond above netherite in terms of just like the perception of value compared to even like the current implementation of like netherite technically being the better gear and the longer lasting tools. I still think about diamonds as more of a treasure than netherite, probably because I've been playing the game before netherite came in, whereas new players might not. And so I'm curious to see like how you make any kind of adjustments like that, whether it's to copper or whether it's to the magic in the game, and how that affects the perceived value of those materials. Like if you change something about the magic system, like you mentioned about maybe diamonds or emeralds being used in magic to focus down and get you what you want, does that then devalue lapis? And then does the player base basically just skip it? Like say like, well, why am I going to bother with this? If I know if I just wait until I have emeralds and then I can get exactly the enchantment that I want, for example, I think a lot of players as I think we've seen over the years, would just beeline for the most efficient way to do it rather than wasting their time with randomness and just trying to get something that may or may not work for them at the time.
Yeah, I think maybe the system there would be to have Lapis and one other thing to help sort of refine the
Right.
whatever the
Aim it sort of
Lapis is
deal.
giving you. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like
Yeah.
focus it on something. But even then, yeah, like I see what you're saying. With Copper, it's interesting with the beacon economy of it all. The other ore blocks that don't yield something you can use for a beacon base are redstone and lapis, and those are all blocks which give you an abundance of resources even if you don't mine them with fortune, right? Everything else gives you one thing per ore block, whereas copper will give you, I think, like 2 or 3 as a minimum, and, you know, with fortune 3, it's, you know, like larger quantities. The same with redstone and lapis, and I think that's part of the reason why they're not used as resource blocks for beacons, is because they are simply much more abundant once you encounter enough of the ore block. And copper is certainly everywhere. Like, it's much more abundant than lapis ore is. You can encounter a biome like a dripstone cave and you'd get enough. Like, you need 164 blocks for a beacon base. You could easily get enough smelted from a Fortune 3 pick and a decent-sized dripstone cave to get a beacon base in minutes. And you can do the same with iron ore if you happen to encounter a huge iron vein underground, but that's still going to take you a great deal of time and effort to mine out all of that stuff, and so it feels commensurate with the effort that you're putting in that you get out something that's so valuable, like a beacon that'll give you haste and regen and whatever else, right? Yeah, and I think it's the beacon is probably established enough that changing the mechanics to require certain blocks be part of the base for certain effects is just not really going to happen, because it requires players to think about, like, do I save all of my diamonds or netherite towards this beacon instead of using them for what you actually want to use it for? And it sort of, I think it holds up people from getting to the technological stage where they're comfortable and want to play Minecraft for longer periods of time, then have to spend a ton of time looking for diamonds so they can get diamond blocks. I think compared with other materials in the game at this stage, and this is going to be a controversial opinion coming from me, I think they've done enough with copper now. I genuinely think that, like, we've reached a saturation point with copper where it's got as many uses as most of the other materials in the game, if not more. I think iron still has it beat in terms of a couple of crafting things like hoppers, like a few functional blocks here and there. But copper has a golem, it has bars, chains, lanterns, you know, all of that kind of stuff now, in addition to having the block set, which I think is great and diversifies it from stuff like iron, which is primarily like a resource block. Copper feels like a decorative block, and it has all of these different layers of aging for each thing. I think they've done enough. And I think if we're adding magical properties, you know, in addition to what we already have in the game, I think it makes more sense to center those around, for a start, a fictional material, because then we don't draw any real-world analogs to what copper is used for in the real world versus what it's sensible to use it for in Minecraft. And I think it also makes more sense to introduce magic in maybe mid to late game. I think the enchanting table and enchanting in general is really meant to be a mid to late game thing, and that's really your first introduction to there being a more magical situation in Minecraft, unless you run into witches early. But I think copper feels like a material you encounter in early game now, and that's evident from the fact that they expect you to use it for stone tier tools and your first armor set that you go caving with. And I think it doesn't really make sense to center a magic system around a resource that you get in such abundance. Magic feels like something that should be rare, unless it was purely the focus of Minecraft to build up some sort of, like, magic system and have it be central to gameplay, which I really don't think they're planning on doing at this stage. I've even seen now some sentiment from more jaded players who feel like Mojang are shoehorning copper into uses that it really isn't fit for, or just, like, adding more uses to copper for the game to justify its existence, even though people, according to them, weren't that interested in, you know, all of this additional copper stuff to begin with. And I think that's mainly around the tools and armor. I think in terms of decoration for stuff, people can take or leave decorative stuff because not everybody's a builder. But I think it seems like copper is reaching a saturation point where it has as many uses as something like iron, and I think we could maybe refocus the discussion on new and interesting materials, or some other stuff that's felt maybe a little neglected, like people want more uses for something like amethyst, perhaps. Stuff like that could happen. And I think lately we've seen examples of Minecraft trying to make decisions that feel unique to Minecraft, Our favorite one being we have striders instead of boats that are resistant to lava. More recently, we have the Happy Ghast as a solution to wanting something like a jetpack. And I think each of them have their own sort of ups and downs, but they feel unique to Minecraft. And if magic is reintroduced to Minecraft in a way that broadens it from the enchanting system, I think they're more likely to find a way that feels unique to Minecraft's own ecosystem rather than, emulating any other fictional property that has a system of magic. So I don't know if copper is necessarily the answer to introducing magic to the game, but I like the notion that Minecraft can think more broadly about what it's capable of and what's out there in the world and what feels like it's part of the game already. And with that, hopefully that's a good place for us to drop off this discussion with you folks and see what you have to say about that. So let us know in the comments, email us if you have any other ideas that would contribute to this discussion. It's always great to follow up on that stuff in future weeks. But for now, that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Thank you so much for watching. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you get some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in. You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday, and our monthly hangouts usually happen towards the end of the month. We've got one of those coming up next Saturday, where you can let us know what you've been up to in Minecraft this month. We currently have 275 patrons, which is up 3 from last week. Lovely to welcome more people on board, and once again, this is the last chance you have to get hold of a discount for our 7-year anniversary celebrations, so head over to patreon.com/thespawnchunks and check that out. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons who help make this show possible. That's Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. It's free to just tell a friend that we are at The Spawn Chunks on social media. You can also find us on your favorite podcasting platform. New episodes are out on Mondays, and of course, there's the video version on YouTube. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is available on our website, thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixel Riffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season, and I talk even more about copper in my latest tier list video. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch as well, doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series and testing out other games from time to time. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
You can listen to my other podcast, The Citadel Cafe, about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I promise Stephen Heads is attached in that one. We are hopefully going to be recording our review of Fantastic Four. New Steps, or First Steps, I think that's the name of it. We're going to be talking about that hopefully this week. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find. Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream at 10 o'clock in the morning in the week and at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Atlantic time on Saturdays. Right now, very much focused on finishing up West Hill in Minecraft, but you can look forward to other games sneaking in there as well.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and copper is already magic.